So as we mentioned before, this is Parshat Tazria. It deals with lots of icky stuff, but it is pretty interesting in the material that it ultimately spins off and allows us to cover. And as we led in with in our discussion, it's going to talk a little bit about the qualities of human beings and what qualities are best for human beings that they can refine, which is pretty much the whole ball of wax with Chassidut, right? How do I refine myself to be better? I will say that I'll give you a short warning about the text that I did not, and I do this a lot with you guys, which is I'm telling you about the texts that I read and hated and did not pick. A very common Devar Torah that almost every rabbi has given at least once, and some rabbis give every year without fail, no judgment, slight judgment, is that Tazria Metzora are connected to Lashon Hara, right? So skin afflictions and bodily illness is directly connected in the Torah, both here and in the book of Numbers, to a story about Aaron and Miriam speaking Lashon Hara, speaking ill of Moses' wife Tzipporah. And they get a skin affliction, and they have to go outside of the camp, and it has to be healed, and then they get to come back in. And so there is an easy move, both in the Talmud and in the medieval commentators who are riffing off of the Talmud, and then, of course, the Hasidic commentators who are riffing off those two earlier schools, to draw a straight line between Lashon Hara, or any kind of inappropriate speech, and skin affliction. And there's a lot of those. And I'll give you a nibble at one that I did not pick. I saw a comment at the end of the section where it started with, in 1848, this is all in Hebrew, in 1848, there was an outbreak of cholera in the city of Vilna. And I was like, oh, what a great text. It's a perfect one for us. And it said, and so they came to Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, who's this very famous rabbi, who is an expert specifically on musar, on refining your own individual ethics. And yada, yada, yada. Basically, the text ends with, it's because of Lashon Hara, all of you should repent from all of the bad things you've said of other people. And I was like, I don't want to teach that. That's no fun. Like, I personally don't have the theology that the coronavirus has struck us worldwide because of 7 billion people speaking Lashon Hara. It doesn't logically make any sense. And it also deals with a theological problem that I don't believe in, of individual sin results in individual punishment. So I just chucked it and we moved on. So that's just a kind of a piece that I will share with you. So, okay. So I will show you now the screen, and we'll actually look at the text that I did actually select for us today. So in Leviticus 12:2, and this is where either Meital or Nitzan, you will come in. Which one of you is going to be reading? Meital or Nitzan? Are you still there?
Yeah, Nitzan wants to read.
All right, Nitzan, you're going to read this English here that I'm highlighting in the blue, okay?
I read the Talmud a couple weeks ago and enjoyed it.
Meital wants to
Okay,
read.
let Nitzan read first.
Speak to the Israelite people thus: when a woman at childbirth bears a male, she shall be unclean 7 days. She shall be unclean as at the time of her menstrual infirmity.
Great. I hope that wasn't too much of an education for Meital and Nitzan into the ways of womanhood. So that's Leviticus 12:2. I'm going to give you a warning. None of that is particularly helpful. It's still quoted at the beginning of our text. It's going to jump in, and our text is going to immediately start referencing last week's Parsha. So to give you the quick summary of last week's Parsha was Tzav, which is about the command, is Shmini. And Shmini deals with the questions of the offerings that were brought at the temple, the priests who are responsible for bringing the offerings, and then the back end of Parshat Shmini deals with the question of the forbidden and permitted animals to eat in kashrut. And so that's where our Parsha is going to jump in, that we have leapt from, here's the tip off, folks, we have leapt without much transition at all from dealing with the problems of clean and unclean animals to the problems of clean and unclean humans, okay? That's your link. Here's the Hebrew text if you'd like to jump in. And Shirley's joining us. Yay, Shirley. Okay. So now we're going to jump in and look at the text. So Meital or Nitzan, will one of you read the first paragraph of this text where it says when a woman at childbirth?
From there to agree at last. When a woman at childbirth, after and before I am in pain, if a person is deserving, it is said of them, I created you before all else in creation, and if it's not, it is said of them, mosquitoes were created before you. Midrash Rabbi Tazria, regardless of whether a person deeds affect the matter, or humans really created last.
Great. All right, we're going to stop there for a sec. So there's this amazing midrash. It's a little bit longer than this, actually, and the cool thing is he's going to name check it in the next paragraph without requiring us to reread an entire midrash. This rabbi, who I'll talk about at the end of the text, is going to kind of go through the midrash without going through the midrash. He does this neat move, and the neat move he does is this. He points out that if you look back at creation, there were 6 days of creation, right? Before God rests on the 7th day. Human beings are created day 6. Birds and fish were created on day 4. All the other animals are created on day 5. So the supposition that the Midrash is basically making here is that there is a potential understanding of the order of creation, that it is in the order of importance, right? That God creates the sun and the moon, the light and the dark, the heavenly bodies, the firmament and the sea, then moves on to the birds and the fish, then moves on to the animals. And all of that is in descending order of importance. And then the last thing God creates is human beings because they're not that important, right? That is a potential understanding that our Midrash is throwing out there. That even a dog is more important than you. Even a mosquito is more important than you because it was created first, okay? The other way of understanding it, at least according to this rabbi, is in reverse. And the understanding of that is a slightly different read of the text, which is to say that God created basically either human beings or the plan for human beings first, because human beings were created in the image of God. And therefore, human beings were created first, and then everything else was created afterwards. And that's also based on an understanding in Genesis 2, which basically says that God creates the entire world, and Adam is set to rule over all of it. Meaning, Adam's in charge. Everything it created in the world was created for Adam's benefit, or Adam and Eve eventually's benefit. So there's 2 ways of understanding creation. Understanding one is human beings are the most important thing because they rule over everything else, and they were planned first, okay? The other way of reading it is human beings were created last because they're hot garbage on a stick and they're not important at all, and God creates everything else first, right? This is a great midrash. I think there's an obvious link to a very famous midrash that's very similar to it. In the Talmud, there's a story that a human being should walk around with 2, I think it's in the Talmud, it may be a Hasidic take on the Talmud. A human being should walk around with 2 notes in their pockets. One says, Bishvili nivra ha'olam, on my account the entire universe was created. And on the other hand, in the other pocket, it should say, I am but dust and ashes. And from where do I come? A putrid drop. And from where do I go? To afar ve'efel, to dust and a place of dirt, right? So you should carry around these two things, like to raise you up when you're feeling down, and another one to bring you low when you feel a little bit too good about yourself, right? When you're like, oh, I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread, you pull out this note and it says like, I came from a putrid drop and I'm going to wind up dust and ashes. I'm worthless. I'm nothing, right? This is a very similar text, but it's directly related to this parsha. Why is this related to this parsha? We have to keep reading in order to understand, okay? So this is this whole thing about after and before I am in pain. So when you're feeling low, basically, you read this note that says, I created you before all else in creation, right? And if you're not feeling low, if you're feeling really good about yourself, what a great human being I am, you pull out the other note or you read the other text. Mosquitoes were created before you. All right. Do we still have a hell fond to read for us? Nitzan, are you ready to read? I unmuted you. It can be explained.
Where do I start?
All the blue.
It can be explained according to Rabbi Simile, just as God's creation of man after every domesticated and wild animals and birds in creation. So too the laws regarding man follow the laws of
Domesticated.
Domesticated.
Make it bigger. Let me make it bigger for you. Actually, Mark, can you make it bigger?
Yes.
Is that better?
Where am I? Where am I? Yes.
Yeah, domesticated.
And wild animals and birds. Example, last week's Torah portion included with the laws of kashrut. The explanation of the matter is the perfection of the spiritual form of human depends on a measure of wisdom in studying the portion of them that is animal in them and the wild animal emotions that are contained by them in order to extend the opportunity for success in this. So were the laws arranged thusly.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Nitzan. Well done. Okay, so let me back up and explain. So Rabbi Simlai is a comment in the Talmud, I think, or he might be in the Midrash, in Midrash Vayikra. Not sure, didn't look it up. Okay. But it's really well explained here by our rabbi, the She'earit Menachem. So the She'earit Menachem says the following: just as God's creation of man is after every domesticated and wild animal and bird in creation, so too the laws regarding man follow the laws of domesticated and wild animals. That's the hint that I dropped on you guys at the beginning, which is that last week's Torah portion finished off with kashrut. And what were the specific laws of kashrut that last week's Torah portion brought? It started by talking about the domesticated animals that you may eat. Then it talked about the wild hoofed ungulates that you may eat, and then the wild animals that go out on paws that you may not eat. And then it goes on to talking about birds, and then it goes on to talking about fish. So he actually breaks it out beautifully in a very specific way to talk about how all of those things have nature like tendencies that can educate us as human beings. So just as all the laws get laid out last week, and then the laws about humans get laid out this week in Tazria, the same thing is ordered out. So it follows the order of creation, right? Not exactly, since the birds and the fish come after the domesticated animals, but we'll let it aside. The animals are all created, and then the humans are created. The animals are all listed in the Parsha as to their clean and unclean nature, and then the humans are talked about in their clean and unclean nature. But since it's a Hasidic take, we're not just going to deal with whether they're literally clean or unclean. We're actually going to deal with whether they are spiritually unclean and what makes them, what in their spiritual nature makes them good or not good. So he goes on and says that the explanation of the matter is this: the perfection of the spiritual form of human depends on the measure of wisdom in subduing the portion of them that is animal in them. So he does this neat move where he says, what can I learn from this idea of our cleanness and uncleanness following animal cleanness and uncleanness? And the answer is, we have an animal nature too. We have a domesticated animal nature, which is a behema in Hebrew. We have a wild animal nature, which is a chaya in Hebrew. And then we have a nature of wild birds, which is ofot. And all of that is, if you wanted to see up ahead, it's here in the Hebrew. So if you pulled off your text and you like doing the Hebrew, it's all there. I'm pointing to it right now. Achar kol behema chaya va'of ma'aseh bereshit kach torato nit parsha achar torat behema chaya va'of. Right? Perusha dvarim, yada yada yada. Back to the English. We need to subdue our animal nature, and he's specifically talking about our domesticated animal nature. Typically in Hasidic thought, the domesticated animal nature is, kind of the cow or the horse in us, which is kind of the dumb, simplistic, bridled, unthoughtful, yoke him to a plow and make him go in a straight line nature of our innermost self, right? We all have an aspect of ourselves which is lunk-headed, which is thoughtless, simplistic, do as you're told, follow along, get stuck in a rut, don't really think more broadly about it, right? It's your base animal nature, but not your base animal nature of like wildness. It's your base animal nature of like a lack of creativity, a lack of thoughtfulness, right? A cow moos, chews its cud, finds more grass, poops, rinse, repeat forever until it becomes hamburger, right? Like that's basically the Hasidic understanding of the nature of a cow, that it's really thoughtless. I'm sure there are Hasidic thinkers out there. There are Hasidic thinkers out there who are vegetarian, who were a little bit nicer to cows, but that's the general take. Then there's another take, which both the Talmud and the Hasidic tradition riffs off of, which is the chaya, the wild animal nature. And that's kind of your base tendencies, which are out of control, right? You would maybe kind of put the 7 deadly sins into these categories. The person who is just eating without any thought, they consume whatever comes before them without regard to kashrut or gluttony, right? Lust is certainly in this category, right? Your wild animal nature that you cannot control, where you do not think at all about the emotions of another person. Anger would definitely be a wild animal emotion, according to other Hasidic thinkers that I've read, like the Sfat Emet and the Tanya, the Balatanya. The Balatanya, who is the first Rabbi of Chabad, Shneur Zalman of Liadi, spends a lot of time talking about the animal nature versus the human nature. That's really his wheelhouse. This rabbi doesn't spend any time talking about birds, but I'm sure there's a bird nature if we really wanted to get into that. And he concludes the paragraph by saying, and in order to extend the opportunity for success in this, so were the laws arranged thusly. So the goal of organizing the laws, according to this rabbi, is to reflect upon our animal nature while we go through the kashrut of animals, and then to reflect upon human nature as we get into human nature. Okay, you can argue that this is a stretch, but this is a traditional method that goes all the way back to the Talmud. So it's a 2,000-year-old legitimate method of understanding text, which we call smichut parshiyut. When you put two parshas in the Torah together, or when you have a paragraph and then you have another paragraph, and they don't have any automatic logical connection, it is the provenance of the rabbis to say, I'm going to hook them together with a logical inference. And that logical inference is a legitimate intellectual device in order to legitimately hook those two ideas together and say, God, self wrote the Torah with this in mind, right? So this is for you, Marilyn, who I know is really interested in authorial intent. Smichut Parshiyut is a classic move in understanding authorial intent when we assume that God is the author, right? Okay. So we're going to keep going, and we can have Nitzan, or who's the other non-Nitzan? Meital read. I think Meital has bugged out, though. So Nitzan, you're going to read the next two paragraphs.
Okay. This is the meaning of this midrash. If a person is deserving and conducts themselves in a fitting manner, it is said of them, of course I created and elevated the divine aspect of before all other creations which were made for you. What high praise is this? However, if a person is not deserving of the spiritual level, Madrega, mosquitoes were created first. Even a small thing, a simple organism like this preceded you. It rules over you and trips you up.
Awesome. Also, I don't know, you guys probably don't know this, or maybe you do, and it's super cool. Your background got inverted with it's so cool.
I have Nitan is having a lot of fun with it. I don't know what's going on. Nitan is enjoying it. So
your innermost neshama is a beach. It's super cool. Okay, so the rabbi spins things, right? He actually takes the midrash and he kind of does a little bit more of a spin on it, which is to say, he says, if you're deserving and you're fitting, then you get kind of assigned one parsha, which is this week's parsha. You are the human parsha, and it's the one that precedes the other, right? Of course, I created and elevated the divine aspect of you before all creations which were made for you. So there's another piece there that he kind of like says and moves on from, which is, you have an animal nature. There's no way around it. We all have animal nature, right? And we also have a human nature, which was God putting God's self in us, right? The animal nature, God puts into all the creatures on the planet. The divine nature, God only puts into humans, right? Which is that whole thing in the beginning of Genesis, I created you in the image of God. Animals don't get created in the image of God, and therefore they don't have the aspect of the divine. So what he's saying is, if you are a good person and you conduct yourself in a fitting manner, you are conducting yourself like a human. And then if not, you're on a lower spiritual level, on a lower madrega, which is another big concept in Hasidic thought. This concept, Rabbi Jeremy in Talmud on Mondays is really good at doing like a glossary of technical terms that you could use for Talmud. And someday, if I ever get my stuff together, I will also create a glossary of key Hasidic terms. Somebody's probably already done it, so I could probably steal it off the internet without doing as much work. But maybe sometime in the future. But madrega, the concept of a madrega, which in modern Hebrew, madregot are stairs. A madrega is a level, right? If you're not on that spiritual level, you're on the animal level. And at that point, we're talking about the midrash. And the midrash is then saying mosquitoes were created first, meaning you're acting on your mosquito nature. You're not fulfilling the expectations that your creator had for you, right? When we give into the chaos in our lives, when we give into the anxiety, when we are not our best selves, when we drive our partners nuts with our sons who are home from college studying organic chemistry, right? When we drive them nuts by giving into our base natures, our behema, our kind of domesticated animal nature, our chaya, our anger, right? Then we are, giving into that lower spiritual level. right? And he finishes with this great line, which I'm pulling in the Hebrew because I loved it. Sholet becha umeakev otcha. So sholet, shilton in Hebrew is power or force. Sometimes it's used for like a monarch or king, and typically a king that is not nice. Sholet bacha is it has power over you. Umeakev otcha, you know the word akev because it's the Hebrew word Yaakov. And why is Yaakov named Yaakov? Because he came out hanging on the ankle of Esav, his brother, right? It's me'akev. It trips you up. It grabs your ankles and trips you over, right? So that's why I translated it exactly this way. It rules over you and it trips you up, right? Your animal nature, and I love this ending, right? Your animal nature is not just disappointing to God. It is not just putting you at a lower spiritual level. It is dominating you. It takes you over. It turns you into an animal. And lastly, it trips you up. It's just messing you up, man. And it's really bad, okay? So that's a really good, I'm going to give you a quick spiritual biography, and then we'll move into the next text. And then before we move to the next text, I want, if you have a comment, a question, a thought, either literally or digitally, raise your hand. But I just wanted to say one thing before we I open it up again, which is a cool thing, a really cool thing. So I always learn a text and if I really like it, I'll bring it to you guys and translate it. And then when I finish translating it, I look up who the guy is. And half these guys, maybe 2/3 of these guys, I know who they are already. I'd never heard of the She'earit Menachem, so I had to go look him up. She'earit Menachem is a guy by the name of Menachem Mendel Hager. And Menachem Mendel Hager is the son of the third Vishnitzer Rebbe. The first Vishnitzer Rebbe, by the way, was named Menachem Mendel Hager also. So he's not that guy. He was named for his great-grandfather, okay? So Menachem Mendel Hager was the second son of the third Vishnitzer Rebbe, whose name was Yisrael Hager. Why am I so interested in this? So Menachem Mendel Hager was not the eldest son, so he couldn't get a job as the next up Vishnitzer Rebbe. Vishnitz is a town in Ukraine, northern Romania. And so he was, I guess, sent, or maybe he chose to go to another town, like a half a day's cart drive, which is the town of Visheve, or Visheve de Sus is the longer name of it, in Romania. And he started his own Hasidic group called the Visheve Hasidim. He passed away in 1941. He had two sons. One of them died in the Holocaust. The other one went to Palestine, and the Visheve Hasidim are still in Bnei Brak in Israel today. Why am I so interested in this, and why do I care? Because Menachem Mendel Hager's father was the third Vishnitzer Rebbe. The Vishnitzer Hasidim are the Hasidic sect that my wife and her family come from. So my wife's mother and great aunt and all of that family live in a neighborhood in Bnei Brak. I've mentioned this before in this class. Live in a neighborhood in Bnei Brak called Vishnitz. And they are my mother-in-law and her entire family are very well known to the Vishnitz family because they're what we would refer to in colloquial 1990s, 2000s America as OG, original gangster. Since they're not Israelis who converted to Vishnitz, or they're not second or third generation Vishnitz, they are first generation, fresh off the boat, came from Romania, still speak fluent Romanian and Hungarian and Yiddish. They are like, everybody knows the Gunzbergs, of the Vishnitz Gunzbergs, right? So anyways, I emailed this all to my mother-in-law to show her, like, it's pretty rare because the Vishnitz Torah is typically fairly dour and not particularly uplifting. It doesn't get reprinted in a lot of other books. So I had to show off for my mother-in-law, like, look, I'm learning the Torah of your great grand Rebbe. So, okay, with that being said, any thoughts on this whole text about kind of like giving into your animal nature, elevating yourself, finding your best qualities? Anybody who would like to share with their hands, or who just has a thought or a question. Joe's got his hand up. Go ahead, Joe.
I got to unmute. Yeah. So this is an interesting discussion because the separation between man and monkey has blurred over the most recent decades. What we've been talking about is known as altruistic behavior, at least in part. And we now have scientific studies that show that there are monkeys and apes, primates, that exhibit altruistic behavior. And I think we could argue that this separation, this religious separation between man and animal, the piece of God that we have in us, part of that is our ability to participate in altruistic behavior. But we're not the only ones. So you could ask the question, do chimpanzees and bonobos have a little bit less of God in them because they do altruistic behavior? Or maybe they're in some way chosen as well.
Yeah.
I love that. That's great. The idea that, so I agree with you that it is a semi-artificial or at least a Hasidic invention to say, to assume that animals aren't like as good as humans, that we're not, but I like the way you assigned it, which was to say that the central determinant is about altruistic behavior, that whether the human takes care of other people, whether their actions are beneficial to others. So I think the neat connection between the text and the thing that you said, in addition to the split between animals and humans, is the concept that our base nature, which may be anger or thoughtlessness, is behavior that animals don't exhibit, and it is not altruistic, or it is not beneficial to other human beings. Whereas the truth is, as you were mentioning primates, like they're all sitting around picking the little nits out of each other's fur. And, some of them are making simple tools to feed their fellow chimpanzees, or some of them are standing guard to protect the weak and infirm in their, primate colonies. So a really good thing. The flip side of that is my least favorite thing I learned about primates is there's these famous Japanese macaques, which are the monkeys that live in Japan, and they live in the mountains, and there are hot springs up there, and there's an entire, you may know this, you may not, there's an entire hierarchy in the primate community as to which of the Japanese macaques get to use hot baths or not, and there's a lot of fighting over it, and it has to do with, of course, impressing females in addition, but which is really, Joe, you and I both know that 90% of being a male is trying to impress females. Okay, I saw Marilyn's hand was up. Go ahead.
Yeah, just two things. I want to back Joe up because there's a wonderful thing going around from YouTube on Facebook right now of a baby elephant stuck in a watering hole, and his mother and her little herd of elephants can't get him out. And a second unrelated group, which normally would be competing with them, come over, and the lead female elephant gets the baby out. And I think that this idea that there is no empathy, no spark of God, whatever, in animals is, pardon me, but a bunch of bull, and now I'll tell you my other point, which is going way back to the thing from the Parshat about separating women. It is the same flawed logic that deems women lesser by suggesting that menstruation is anything but normal, natural, and comes from God as a way for us to be fruitful and multiply. And so when you begin to set this paradigm up that say animals are lesser and lack the kind of empathy that Joe described and which this elephant suggests, and that permeates into all of these decisions about women, that has been bothering me since you first put the quote up. And I think that this is a very, very flawed analogy.
I'm with you. It's funny that you mentioned that. Whenever I see the word madrega, I remember a comment I made to the Hasidic teacher who basically taught me everything I know about Hasidut, Reb Mimi Feigelson, who was a student of Shlomo Carlebach. And Reb Mimi Feigelson taught a class where the word madrega appeared in the class when I was a first-year rabbinic student, when I didn't know anything back in 2001. I still don't know anything, but that's another matter. And the word madrega appeared, and I said basically the same thing as you, Marilyn, but slightly differently, which was, I didn't say it in a feminist kind of way, which is that I was troubled by the notion that there are spiritual levels and that there are individuals who are lower and higher and so on and so forth. That being said, over time, I have kind of evolved to a different understanding of the concept of madrigot. I'm with you that any of the sexism that appears in Jewish traditional texts might undo my comfort level with the concept of madrigas. But that being said, so I'll be blunt and slightly political. When I see a whole bunch of people demonstrating in Harrisburg that we need to quote unquote open up the economy, and they're flying Confederate flags while they do that, or even worse than Confederate flags, as some of you may have seen on the internet, all I can think of is these are selfish people, and they just want to be able to go get their quote unquote haircut, and they just want to be able to go to the bars, and they do not care about spreading a virus that could kill somebody who is more infirm than them. I have no problem, Marilyn, saying this person is on a lower spiritual madrega than me, because they are giving into their animal nature, which is rooted in selfishness. Now, to your point, it's unfair to say that animals are overwhelmingly selfish, but I'll be real blunt. I'm pretty sure mosquitoes just fly around all day looking to suck my blood and don't think deeply about whether I really want my blood sucked or not. Go ahead, Marilyn, you want to respond?
Because God created them that way. Now, first of all, I'm a humanist, not a feminist, but that's, but secondly, I agree with you. I don't think anything I'm saying takes away from the concept that human beings have a choice to be willfully ignorant or willfully inconsiderate, okay? And I have always forgiven ignorance, because ignorance can be taught, it can be remedied, people can learn and they can change. But what we're seeing in these terrorists, I don't call them protesters, they are terrorists because they are threatening others to serve themselves. What you see is willful ignorance, and this is a choice that a human being has made. And to say that they have something lesser from God, I disagree. I think it's what we do with what we get from this spark of God that we all supposedly have. We have a choice of what to do with this, and they are choosing poorly. And so I don't disagree with you that they are lesser, but it's a different kind of lesser. It is a choice, and it is on them, not because God made them less or gave them less of the spirituality, but because they have it and they're choosing to throw it out the window.
I'm with you. I'm with you 100%.
I got angry because I agree with you, but I've seen those flags and I've seen all the things going on, and no, but that is a choice. And you give them an out when you say it's like something internal that they have no control over. They do.
Sure. Yeah, I'm with you. I think I'll say something and then Audrey go. I'm with you. I think it's the classic famous teaching of Rabbi Meir and Bruria. Rabbi Meir sees a bunch of really terrible people. I think they're bandits. I don't remember the story in the Talmud. And he basically says, may God smite them. And his wife Bruria turns to him and says, it would be better if you would pray for God to turn their hearts and that they repent their deeds. And Meir goes, you're right, honey. Right? Like, that's the whole story. That's the whole story. And it's a great story in the Talmud because it shows kind of female wisdom, one. But two, it also shows that, like, it is a higher ordered level of moral thinking to see terrible people making terrible, immoral decisions. And instead of saying, boy, I hope they either get the coronavirus or get hit by a truck or a meteor or whatever, it's better to say, I hope they change. I hope they see the light. I hope they change their hearts. Audrey, go ahead.
Well, there's a theory out there that says that our goal in existence is to improve our souls and the souls of other people, and the people who believe in coming back to another life believe that in the next life you're supposed to do better and you're supposed to improve the things that you did wrong in the former life, whatever. I don't know where the Hasidim come in with believing that, but that should also go with animals and any other creature, that it's our job to not only improve ourselves, but to improve other people, which also goes with what you just said. That we have this spark, but we have to nurture it to make it better.
It's a great thought. I'll throw out 3 possibilities really quickly. One idea, the thing that you're talking about, reincarnation in Judaism, is called Gilgul HaNefesh. It's a Kabbalistic idea that some of the Hasidim pick up. There's a couple ideas. The basic Hasidic understanding is that you hopefully refine your soul enough so that you go to Olam Haba. Another idea is that if you flunk at refining your soul, you are reincarnated in this life, and you get another shot at it. And then the third possibility is that there is no Olam Haba, there is just Gilgul HaNefesh, reincarnation forever. That's a less Hasidic idea and a more Kabbalistic idea. But you have to there's a bunch of afterlife beliefs in Judaism, you have to speedball them all together to get certain kind of results. And the ultimate answer that everybody gives is, yeah, I don't know. Was there another hand up? I think Joe almost wanted to talk and then thought better of it. Good. Okay, we're gonna move on to the next text. If you have to, this is like the kind of cutoff point for 1 hour. I'm gonna teach this one really fast because it's, but if you want to stick around till 1:30, we'll go till 1:30. This other text that I brought is one of our more familiar dudes by the name of the Sfat Emet. So Rabbi Yehuda Aryeh Lieb Alter of Ger, who was the 3rd Gerer Rebbe, and was a great luminary and light of his time. So he is commenting on a really interesting verse, and he has a really cool spin on it. So this is more about really creative moves than it is about anything. And you'll see that it's going to riff on creation and the creation story again, which I think is kind of cool, that multiple rabbis could come up with a link between this weird esoteric section about skin affliction and menstrual purity and go all the way back to creation. It's a big move, and more than one rabbi came up with it. Most of them are riffing off of the Midrash. So the Midrash made this move first, about 2,000 years ago, which is why the book that I'm working on is called Life Lessons from Recently Dead Rabbis. Because the Hasidic rabbis I consider recently dead, as opposed to the Talmudic rabbis who were 2,000 years ago. Yes, it's a funny title, but whatever. Anyways, so the verse in the Torah that they deal with is, we're going to need it in Hebrew. Adam ki hieh v'or basro se'et o shapachat o baheret v'haya v'or basro lenega tzarat v'huva el ha'aron hakohen o el achad mebenav hakohanim. So the verse in Leviticus says, when a person, Adam, important word to hang on to in both the Hebrew and the English, has on the skin, or, again, important word to hang on to, of his body a swelling or rash or discoloration, and it develops into a scaly affection on the skin, or, of his body, it shall be reported to Aaron the priest or one of his sons the priest. So, skin afflictions, take it to the priest. That's the pshat of this verse, the simple understanding. None of that is of any interest to the Sfat Emet, who says this in the Hebrew. Before Adam sinned, divine light shone from every creation. So again, we're going all the way back to creation. The Creator saw the light from each and every creature, and the light of the 7 days was revealed. However, after the sin, it is said, and God made garments of skins for Adam and his wife and clothed them. And that's in chapter 2, verse 18. So we've got this paradigm set up where the words that we saw in our commentary, Adam and Or, also appear in Genesis 1 and 2. Adam is the name of the first human being, but it's also the word in Hebrew for a person. And the word Or also appears there, except there it appears in two different spellings. One is with an aleph, or with an aleph means light. And that's this line here, before Adam sinned, divine light, or from God, Zarah or Zaracha, from every creation. And then we get Or, which is with an ayin down here. So same sounding word, different word, right? It's a pun to some degree. It's almost a pun if it weren't a very brilliant rabbinic move. You can't really say brilliant rabbinic move is a pun, but it's a move in which you're taking two similar words. Same sound, different spelling. Okay, so God made garments of skins for Adam and his wife and clothed them. So he's going to understand the following. So he continues, these covered and hid in every manner. Or is related to the aver, blind. So the spelling of the Hebrew word for skin, or, and this Hebrew word for iver are the same. The difference is one extra vav in the word iver. And the word iver means blind. It was difficult to recognize the light amidst the covering of darkness that separated it. And just as natural skin has perforations, it exposes the body to the air and exudes waste and sweat, so too the skin of the creation has windows and holes, pathways and fissures for the hidden light, the orot hagnuzim, to get in, and the shmutz, my word, to get out. Okay, what is all that? What's going on here? Basically, there's sort of a weird metaphysics going on here, which is the question of how did God create human beings and how did God put divine nature in humans? Well, the answer is, from a Kabbalistic understanding, God puts divine light in human beings. But then and there is no skin. Human beings had no skin back in the day. They were luminous beings, right? Adam and Eve were kind of like giant, shining, bright lights that wandered around, illuminating with divine light everywhere they went, until before the sin. After the sin, according to Kabbalah, according to the Zohar, God has to clothe them, right? The clothing is, we always think of it as they were buck naked wandering around in the garden. The Kabbalah says no, they weren't naked. They didn't have skin. They wandered around and they just shone divine light out of their pores. So what happens in chapter 2? According to the Zohar, God slaps skin on them in order to stop the divine light from getting out. It's a bad thing, right? The divine light stops shining. But human beings are still divine creatures. They are still imbued with divine holiness. And so skin, as is in both a metaphysical and in a literal way, according to the Sfat Emet, has pores, right? The pores let out sweat, it lets out schmutz, it keeps us from getting sick, but it also keeps the divine light in, and it also protects us, right? It also creates darkness for our souls, right? So to say it differently, Adam before sin needed no protection from darkness. Adam's soul, Adam, human beings, so Adam and Eve, their souls were luminous, and they had no darkness whatsoever. They were absolutely luminous beings. And then when they sin, God covers them, which covers over their divine luminousness, but also creates darkness in their souls, right? They become darker. There's another line here, which I just wanted to throw out. There still have to be in skin cracks, pathways and fissures for the divine light, the orot hagnuzim. So the divine light, the orot hagnuzim, is another Kabbalistic concept that goes all the way back. And the concept is that God creates a supernal light, right? The light that existed at the beginning of creation. And then God kind of hides it away. I like to put this into concepts around the Big Bang. There's this concept that the Big Bang, at the beginning of the Big Bang, all the matter of the universe was contained in a ball about the size of a basketball. And when the Big Bang kicks off, it all explodes all over the place. There's also this concept that in astronomy, that a huge percentage of the matter in the universe, somewhere between 40 and 80%, is dark matter. It's completely missing. We can't find it. We don't know where it went or what it is. We just know from doing the physics that there was more matter back at the beginning of the Big Bang, and we don't know what happened to it. According to Einstein, that matter can't have disappeared. It had to have converted into either energy or matter, and we don't know where it went. Kabbalistically, that's very relatable to this concept of the orot hagnuzim. There is energy, there is matter that is hidden. It's dark matter. We don't know what happened to it. We don't know where it is. It is ganuz. It is hidden. It is missing, right? And Kabbalah would say it's hidden in human beings, right? That light is hidden in each human being. And it is just, you can't see it. And skin is a covering that keeps the hidden light from completely escaping. It hides most of it, but it cracks out a little bit. Like human beings have a little bit of light that comes out through us. So continuing, he starts to talk about this parsha in which we get like skin afflictions, right? It's talking about skin afflictions, lesions and schmutz and befouling. When natural skin is befouled, the natural wastes cause lesions. So too the skin of creation. These ailments are a sign of the befouling of the skin, that it becomes impossible for the inwardmost light to be revealed. Simply put, when you get literal schmutz on your skin and you don't clean it off, you get some sort of itchy rash, right? That's why you take a shower after you go to the gym, to be very blunt. Metaphysically, the same applies according to the Sfat Emet. The Sfat Emet would say, right, this guy was like a dermatologist. He was brilliant, a spiritual dermatologist. He would say, when you do bad things, you get schmutz on yourself, your spiritual schmutz. And if you don't clean the spiritual schmutz, say that 5 times fast, the spiritual schmutz, if you don't clean it off yourself by doing tshuva, then it's impossible for the light to get revealed, right? Your skin, which is the kind of porous, like vessel by which divine light emanates, if you beschmutz it, it doesn't emanate. All right, he keeps going. Don't worry, we're almost done. However, the ailment is only a recognizable sign of the inward malady that is in need of healing, from which divine loving kindness will be stirred to purify it, right? If you have an outward lesion, metaphorically speaking, not literally, if you are spiritually ill, you will display it in spiritual ways, right? And I think that that's very true, right? A person who is spiritually at a low level will express it with all sorts of crappy behavior, and it'll come out, right? Thus, it shall be reported to the Kohen, for also the impurity is determined by the Kohen. For in essence, the lesion is healing by him. This really interesting idea. There should be an apostrophe there to finish it, or a close quotation. Where do you go to figure out your spiritual maladies? You go to the Kohen, right? You ask for spiritual guidance from another person to say, like, I'm off track, right? I'm messed up. I've got to fix where I'm at, right? A complete person, it is fitting to rely upon this, that they should show this to him in his lowly state. So if you're not doing very well, if you're beschmutzidik in your soul, you need to go to a person who is of a higher non-schmutzidik state, i.e. the Kohen, in order to get right, to get straightened out, right? The Kohen as spiritual dermatologist, right? I am spiritually beschmutzt, and I need to be unbeschmutzt. So I go to a person who is clean, and they say, here's your problem. You know, your anger is overcoming you. You are treating other people poorly. You are fixating on anxiety. You are eating too much bacon. right? Like, and you go and you get spiritually unschmutzed, right? We all do this in life. If I have a computer problem, I don't try to fix it myself. I take it to a computer specialist. If I need my front stairs fixed, I call a concrete expert. Like, Lord knows I shouldn't do that work myself. I'm an idiot. I would, people would die on my front steps if I tried to cast concrete. I call professionals, right? There's certain things I know how to do. And so too with spiritual maladies, right? I don't assume I can diagnose my own spiritual maladies. I go to a person and they fix it. And that's what the Sfat Emet is saying. This verse is saying, if you're beschmutzed in your soul, don't try and fix yourself. Go talk to another person and get yourself unbeschmutzt with expert advice. He literally refers it to the Kohen, but he's kind of talking to the difference between a complete person and a person in a lowly state. He finally finishes with, and in the place where this impurity is in conflict with your innermost self, it will come to be revealed, and he will be able to purify it, right? This spiritual expert, this spiritual dermatologist. And then he finishes with his brilliant finishing pun, and extract the light, or from amidst the skin, or. So he uses this move to say the light comes out of the skin, but only if you work on yourself. And the work on yourself needs to be done from an expert. All right. With that, I will conclude our teaching and turn off the recording. And if you guys have any comments, questions, or thoughts to conclude, or any legal advice on wills and trusts, we'll jump back into that.